want to go over something. I just finished a video on the steel about it bogging. There's lots of reasons why something like this is going to bog, why your weed eater bogs. This is specifically going to be for weed eaters. And we're going to go over some of the common ones. Don't want to say these are the only reasons, but these are the most common. And I would kind of go in this order. So let's get started. First one's a real deal breaker, so which is why I usually like to check it first. First one is, if you pull the cord, do you feel resistance? If it just pulls with literally no resistance and it's a weed eater that's a 2-cycle, not those weed eaters that have like valves, but just a normal 2-cycle weed eater, and you don't feel anything or hear anything, listen. Like, it took force to pull that over. If you don't, stop here, throw it away, get a new one. Assuming that you have compression, look at your fuel. Is it old? Now, I don't mean did you just put it in there. I mean, how old is the fuel? I don't care if you mixed it yesterday. If you mixed fuel that was in a can from last fall and it's springtime, it's still bad. I don't care how long it's been in there. The age of the fuel itself. If it's ethanol fuel, I wouldn't run anything longer than 3 months, even if it's been treated with a stabilizer. If it's not ethanol, you have closer to a year. So if you looked at it, it looks clean. Depending on your oil, could be blue, could be red, but it's not like discolored or doesn't smell bad. I mean, I'm sure most people know what gas smells like. If it smells not like gas, take that out, prime it a few times, put new gas in, give that a try. That usually will make a pretty significant difference. You'd be surprised. 3 is your primer bulb even priming? Do you even have a primer bulb? If you have one and it's not priming, you have a fuel delivery problem. What you're going to want to look at the following. Look inside the tank. If you see the fuel lines and it's cracked or there's no fuel filter, there should be 2 of them. One with a fuel filter, one without. If you see both and they both don't have a filter, or they're both short, or they both look like just haggard, replace it. Very well could be as simple as a fuel filter, or a bad line.
How's it going?
Not bad, you?
Good. What's your schedule looking like?
I mean, nothing really for the rest of the day or tomorrow, really the same thing.
Whenever you want.
Okay.
It's up to you. Tomorrow's probably better, don't you think? Or it might be a little rainy. If I can bring a pop-up and set it up here for you.
Yeah,
Keep the rain off you.
that's fine. I do have a meeting at 1 to 1:30, but I should be out by 1:30.
Okay.
So anytime after that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll come down and make sure you still want to do it. If you're good, then I'll hook up and we'll get after it. But anytime after 1:30.
Yeah, I should have the garage open. Just come on over.
Yeah, so I'm somewhere at 1 too. And I should be done by 1:30, but I won't be home until 1:45, 2 o'clock. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah. Then we'll hook up and get her done.
Sounds good.
I think it's just one jack. You'll see. We'll decide. I'll have you look at it. And, the one I bent back into kind of shape is like. I think you should. Maybe it's a couple parts on that you could weld to reinforce it. I'll have you look at it.
Okay.
Right.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What's your first name, man?
Michael.
Michael, I'm Don. And that's Kat.
Yes.
All right, thanks, Michael.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, where are we? Sorry. So, now, fuel lines could be this simple problem. Generally, though, if you don't have a fuel filter, you're going to have a carb problem. So, if you did that and you still have problems, the next thing I'm going to say is you're going to want to clean or replace your carburetor. Now, if your fuel line is good, if your fuel is good, and you checked your plug, or if it's a new plug, all that's good, it could be as simple as an adjustment issue. If you go online, you can get this little tool pouch. Inside here is like 8 or 10 little adjustment screwdrivers. Each one of these carbs has a different style in general of adjustment. This one's very simple, it just has a flathead. They're generally not like that though. There's usually two as well. So look at your particular one. There's some that are just have these little spines on the side, some that, you know, are hexagon. Whatever yours is, make sure your toolkit has it. They're usually relatively inexpensive, and this toolkit, I've yet to run across one that I can't adjust. At that moment, you want to watch the video on how to adjust a 2-cycle. I'm not going to get into it here, but watch that video or watch this video about the Steel FS 40C. I went into semi-good detail on that one. So you tried everything, you adjusted the carb, you replaced the carb, or you cleaned it. Your fuel lines are good. Your spark plug is either very good or very new. Your fuel is good. Your primer is still primed. There's no fuel leaking anywhere. There's no nothing. Make sure your carb is on there securely. In here, I'm not going to show you because this is very generic, but whatever method of attachment, take off the cover for the air filter and make sure everything's screwed down tight. Over time, the screws can become loose, and then if it doesn't make a good connection to the motor, you're going to have a huge vacuum leak, and that can cause a big problem. Assuming that is also happening, could have a crank seal issue. What's a crank seal? Crank seals come in all shapes and sizes. They're kind of like people, but they generally all look like this. Just rubber fits around the crank, which is the crank shaft, and on the inside, on the outside, there's a housing for it that gets pressed in there pretty tight, and it keeps air from going inside the bottom of a 2-cycle. Why is that important? Well, on the 2-cycle, fuel goes into the bottom end. As the piston goes up, it sucks in the fuel. Well, it also sucks in air. If your air is getting in there from a different place that it shouldn't be, you're going to have not enough fuel and a whole lot more air. And then when the fuel goes up to the top of the cylinder to get compressed and burned, you're going to have a very lean mixture. It's going to be erratic. That's a telltale sign of that is the idle will fluctuate greatly. If you have that problem, crank seal is going to be your issue. Generally though, bogging is not going to be that one, but it very well could be. It's just, that's not nearly as common. Usually it's what we discussed earlier. So you've done all that, and it still isn't. Well, here's the thing. We're going to look at the exhaust. Why the exhaust, you say? Well, the exhaust will tell you a lot of important things. One, is there a lot of smoke? If there is, you either tune the carb wrong, or the carb that you put on there, if it's brand new, is malfunctioning. The wrong one, who knows? I mean, maybe it was made on a Monday. Or if you cleaned it, there could be something wrong. You're going to want to reopen it, make sure everything is put back on right. There's not a spring missing or something. I would highly recommend watching the video on how to clean this carb, especially since this carb is fairly generic, and a lot of that information translates to pretty much any machinery, such as weed eaters. But if there's not a lot of smoke, then, or excuse me, going forward, so you either have that or potentially you're choked. Now, your choke for the carb could be malfunctioning. Maybe it's broken, maybe it's stuck in a choke position, or your exhaust is plugged. A lot of these steels and other machines have their own specific style of spark arrestor. Some are just a little screen is being pressed on. Some is like a little screw that comes out with a screen attached to the end of it and goes inside the muffler. You know, there's a lot of different designs. Look at that screen. If that screen is packed like black, you can't see through it, that could be your problem. So I would still recommend looking at the fuel lines, because even if you have a plugged screen and the fuel lines and everything are shot, you're still not going to be running right. I know I said it's going to be in order, but it's really hard to find a place for that plugged arrestor. Technically, I like to look at that after I look at the fuel. I look at the exhaust, but you know, you do you. Unless it's a steel, generally that's not that big of a problem. Or if you have this real affection for putting too much oil in your fuel or using bad fuel, that will definitely, or excuse me, not only too much, but very low quality oil. Even if you put a lot of oil with a high quality oil, you probably won't get that problem. But if you're using pretty cheap, like Walmart brand oil, you might be having little clogging issues there. You know, same thing like with you. If you only eat McDonald's, you're probably gonna have a heart attack. So it needs to breathe. Let's just put it that way. If you look at it and it's dirty, like it just can't see through it or very minimally, I recommend if you have any MAP gas, propane potentially, but you're going to be using a whole lot of propane, burn it off. Once it gets red hot, the carbon will release and you can blow it off, no problem. If you don't have that, carb spray takes a pretty decent amount off, and then just take like a brush and gently clean it. Soap and water, hot water, you know, that all of it can work. Just make sure you don't damage it, make sure you get it clean and put it back on. You don't have to put it back on. I'm not telling you have to. I'm saying you should though. You should always have your spark arrestor there. They have it for a reason, unless you want to burn down your wherever you are, especially if it's a dry area and you are using like a tall brush, that could get dangerous. So I recommend you clean it, put it back on. That's about it. So if yours is bogging, I would check all those problems. 97% of them is going to involve those. Start from the easiest one first. It's a quick recap. Compression, fuel, you could check for spark, look at your plug, or even better, just get a new one. Carburetor replacement, cleaning. Fuel lines, probably just replacement. There's really no cleaning involved there. Potentially checking your choke on either side, exhaust or carburetor. Make sure all that's functioning correctly. Make sure the carburetor is fully seated and fully tightened. At the very end, the most expensive for a repair, and not necessarily for parts, but just for labor and most time consuming, it's definitely going to be the crank seal. You might want to reconsider just even doing it at that point, unless you are going to do it yourself. It's a real savings, but it can be a real pain, trust me, and you can potentially damage it. Watch a video. I have a concrete cutter, and when I replace some crank seals, same exact principle, just different machine, 2-cycle, smaller crank. Don't worry about it. It's not too difficult as long as you take your time. If you're angry, don't do it. Anyway, here we are. As a final piece of this, I want to show you what it should listen like. With the exception of the crank seal, this machine has everything done to it. It has new fuel lines, new cleaned carburetor, new plug, and new fuel. So when I turn it on, it should turn on relatively easy. There you have it. Majority of these fixes, all you need to do is get the toolkit, needle nose pliers, and whatever supplies you need. That's it. If you want specifics on how to do any of the carbs, watch this video on the FS40C. If you need any specifics on the crank seal, watch the concrete one. You know, hopefully this helped you out. If you like what you see, keep watching. If you have any questions or any particular problems and you did all this, let me know. We can go over other things. There's spark related problems, all that. Generally though, spark is not that big of an issue with these, especially if it's newer. But I will keep posting, so definitely keep watching. Subscribe, follow me on Small Engine 101 on Instagram. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good night.